Okay, so you're writing a thesis. Maybe it's an undergraduate thesis, maybe a master's thesis, maybe a PhD dissertation. Now, this is a written document, right? So one of the mistakes that students often make is to think they're doing this work. They're using their tools of economics, which they're doing, obviously, but to forget that writing is really, really important. It's super important that you convey your information to your audience. So the first thing you should do with any writing is to figure out who your audience is. Right? It seems obvious, but you want to write to them in particular. So who is your audience? Well, your audience is going to be whoever is going to be reading and grading your thesis. Right? And you should be writing to them. Okay, you write in this weird third-person academic-y sort of way, but they are the people who are reading your thesis, and they are the people you have to communicate with in your writing. So that could be different, right? If you're doing a PhD thesis, PhD dissertation, it's almost certainly your advisor and a group of experts that your advisor handpicks. So these are people who are experts in your field, right? And so a lot of the things you say there, you can take as given because they know your field. You don't have to convince them that the field is interesting the same way you would if it was someone who didn't know your field, right? You don't have to convince them of the tools that are used in that particular field are good tools if they're standard tools, because that's your audience. But if you're doing an undergraduate thesis or a master's thesis, your audience might be, and actually probably will be, different. And it's going to be different at different institutions, and it's going to be different for different levels of thesis. So you really have to find out in your institution for the kind of thesis you're doing, who's going to be reading that, who's grading it, right? And they're the people you're writing to. So it could be that the person who's grading it is your thesis advisor, in which case you are writing in the weird third-person way, but you're writing to him or her, right? And so the kind of things that they already know, the kind of things that they think are important, you can take a little bit as given, right? But that's not most places. It happens, right? It's a thing, and if that's, find out, ask, who's going to be grading my thesis? And if it's your advisor, that's the person you're writing to, your implied audience, right? More likely for undergraduate or master's thesis, it's going to be someone from the department, kind of more or less randomly picked, and you should find out whether it's more or less randomly picked, right? So if, say, you're doing an empirical thesis on labor mobility, it's a particular topic, and maybe there's 3 people in your department who work on labor mobility or work using those same tools, but maybe other subjects. Maybe your department is more likely going to pick one of those people. Or maybe not. Maybe it's going to be completely random. You should know. You should know who your audience is. Now, they probably won't tell you exactly who's going to grade it, but you should learn the general policy so you know who your audience is. Now, a lot of places, most places I would say, the person who's going to be grading your thesis for a master's or undergraduate thesis is going to be just some random person in the department. So some random faculty member, not your advisor. Many, many places. It could be your advisor, find out. But then you don't have the same implied audience, right? So when you're writing, you don't have somebody who thinks that this is an important topic, right? Or thinks that this tool is the correct tool or sort of the standard tool. They're just somebody who knows a lot of economics, and can follow along, but you have to lead them along. So if your audience is someone sort of a random economist, then you have to take them from where they are to your way of thinking about things. It's more of a longer journey, right? You have to say, okay, some random economist, maybe you're doing an empirical paper and it's just some wacko theorist who gets it. You don't know, right? Possibly. And so you have to convince that person that this is an interesting topic, that it's a useful topic, and you might want to go along a little bit and sort of say a little more about what are the standard tools in this subject, and what are the standard questions that are asked, and how your question is different a little bit. But if you know, for example, that your advisor is going to be reading it, and your advisor is an expert in this field, you have to mention that stuff, but you don't have to go on at such lengths about it. And in fact, it can even be a little dangerous too, because if you're thinking it's important for different reasons than the advisor is thinking it's important, then you just dug yourself a hole, right? So it's really important to figure out who your reader is. And very likely they won't tell you exactly who it is, because it's not determined yet. But if it's going to be your advisor, it's very useful to know that. If it's going to be experts picked by your advisor, it's very useful to know that. And if it's going to be some random economist in the department, it's very useful to know that, so that you can do a little more hand-holding to take them from, I think economics is interesting, to your particular topic is interesting, and the particular way you're going about it is useful, right? So the kind of things that are taken as given are different. Now, when you look at papers in the field, like if you look at actual papers that are published, they have an implied audience too. They have to do, anytime you write anything for anybody, you have to figure out who your audience is, right? If you're writing for 5-year-olds, you have to know you're writing for 5-year-olds, and you don't write Ulysses and give it to the 5-year-olds because they're not gonna enjoy it so much. You write a different book for the 5-year-olds than you do for the literary crowd, right? So you have to know your audience. And most of the articles in journals, the audience is experts in that field. Right? People who have worked in that field, who have developed techniques in that field, really truly experts in that field. So most, and spaces at a premium in journals. So the papers you're reading in journals are papers where they take a lot of stuff as given, like all the experts in the field know this stuff, and so they don't go on and on about that stuff. But very likely your audience is not experts in the field. It's experts in the general field of economics, but not in your little niche. Right? And so you have to do a little more hand-holding if that's the case. Right? So always when you're writing to somebody. There's somebody who's reading that. You need to know as much as you can who that is. So you're pitching your spiel at them in particular. Right? So that's your first job as thesis, find out who you're writing to.